In the heart of Illinois' endless prairies, where the wind carries echoes of unanswered prayers, 17 young souls vanished into eternal silence. Not lost to God, but stolen by men wearing his robes. What if divine justice waits not in heaven, but in the shadows they left behind? Tonight, feel the chill of retribution. Imagine a vast, unbroken sea of prairie grass, undulating under a steel-gray sky in central Illinois, 1847. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, but beneath it lingers something sharper, decay, perhaps, or the metallic tang of blood long soaked into the soil. Here, amid the isolation of the frontier, rises Sacred Heart Seminary, a Gothic sentinel of brick and stone, its spires piercing the heavens like desperate pleas. Founded to forge priests from American soil, it promised salvation. Instead, it became a tomb for the innocent, a marketplace where souls were bartered like chattel. 17 young men, priests and seminarians, entered these walls between 1847 and 1862, their hearts aflame with divine calling. They vanished, one by one, into a void the church sealed with lies and Latin incantations. Official records whispered of transfers to distant missions, of holy retreats in secluded abbeys. But truth, buried like a relic under chapel floorboards, screams otherwise. Abduction, trafficking, murder. And the architects of this horror? Not shepherds of God, but wolves in cassocks. Irish fugitives who slit the throats of true clergy and donned their identities. For 15 years, they ruled this sacred ground, turning prayer halls into prisons, altars into auction blocks. The Vatican locked away the evidence for a century and a half, fearing the scandal would shatter faith like stained glass under a hammer. But shadows don't die. They deepen. Tonight, we unearth them, layer by layer, feeling the weight of guilt that clings to every stone. We'll walk these halls, hear the echoes of muffled cries, and confront the spiritual rot that questions. If evil wears the face of holiness, does divine justice sleep or stalk? To grasp the abyss that swallowed these 17 souls, we must first descend into the turbulent world that birthed Sacred Heart, an era of famine, faith, and fury. The year 1847 dawns like a plague-ridden specter over America. Across the Atlantic, Ireland starves. The Great Potato Famine has claimed over 1 million lives, their bodies bloating in roadside ditches, skins stretched taut over bones like parchment scriptures of despair. Survivors flee on coffin ships, crammed into fetid holds where disease dances like demons. They wash ashore in American ports, Boston, New York, Chicago, hundreds of thousands, gaunt and ghostly, clutching rosaries as lifelines. Their Catholicism, fierce and unyielding, clashes against a Protestant nation simmering with suspicion. Papists, they're called, invaders loyal to a foreign pope, threats to the Republic's soul. Riots erupt like hellfire. In Philadelphia, 1844, nativist mobs torch Catholic churches, the flames licking skyward as bells toll in agony. 13 dead, 50 wounded, bodies crumpled in streets slick with blood and rain. In Charlestown, Massachusetts, the Ursuline convent burns, nuns scrambling through shattered windows, habits singed, prayers choked by smoke. Priests are tarred and feathered in daylight parades of hate, their screams mingling with jeers. Catholic families barricade doors at night, crosses clutched like weapons, whispering Hail Marys against the knock that could bring the mob. In this crucible of contempt, the church craves native sons, priests born on American soil, voices untainted by accents, bridges over the chasm of distrust. Foreign clergy, no matter their piety, are marked outsiders in a land of insiders. They preach salvation, but locals hear subversion. Enter Sacred Heart Seminary, erected in 1845 on 400 acres of windswept prairie, 40 miles southwest of Chicago's bustling chaos. A beacon, they called it, but it was more fortress than sanctuary, walls thick as confessionals, guarding secrets yet unborn. Architect Patrick Keeley, fresh from crafting Gothic masterpieces in New England, designs a colossus, 3 stories of red brick, windows soaring 20 feet, arched like judgmental eyes. Inside, hand-carved Bavarian pews gleam under gas lamps. A bell tower booms across the flats, summoning the faithful or warning the damned. Cost $40,000, a king's ransom, drawn from Catholic titans. Patrick Murphy, Lord of Great Lakes Shipping, pours in fortunes from timber and trade. Francis O'Brien's Milwaukee Brewery Empire funds frescoes of saints, their eyes following you like accusations. Widow Margaret Connolly, heiress to Chicago real estate, donates $8,000, blood money from land once sacred to native tribes, now paved with progress and penance. The library, a vault of wisdom, 3,000 tomes stacked like silent witnesses, rare grimoires of theology, Aristotle's whispers, Galileo's heresies tempered by faith. Modern miracles abound. Indoor plumbing gurgles from deep wells, gaslights flicker like captured fireflies, a furnace roars in the bowels, ducks snaking heat through winter's icy grip. Illinois blizzards howl like banshees, but inside, warmth mocks the cold, symbolic, perhaps, of hellfire cloaked in comfort. Father Superior Edmund Walsh arrives from County Cork in 1846, a giant among men. 6 feet 4 inches, gray eyes piercing like stigmata nails, silver beard cascading like a prophet's mantle. Letters from Dublin's Archbishop glow with praise. Degrees from Maynooth Seminary in moral theology, canon law. He recites Aquinas in Latin, debates doctrine with bishops, his voice a thunder that commands obedience. But beneath the scholarly facade, a serpent's coil. Rector Thomas Murphy, 40s, gray-haired, bespectacled, claims from Louvain University, secretary to Cork's bishop, treatises on philosophy that echo through academe. Dean Patrick O'Brien, 35, rhetorician extraordinaire, Royal University of Ireland, chaplain to nobility, sermons that wring tears from stone hearts. Together, they embody authority, intellect sharp as thorns, devotion deep as graves. Bishop William Corder of Chicago, dazzled, grants them free rein, autonomy that becomes a license for atrocity. Fall 1847. The first class assembles, 12 youths aged 18 to 25. Vessels of hope from Midwest hearths. Heinrich Müller and Johann Weber, German sons from Milwaukee, families pooling pennies from beer halls and farms. Patrick Kelly and Sean Malloy, Irish Chicago stock, priesthood a ladder to dignity. Antoine Dubois, French fur trade heir from Detroit, wealth scented with beaver pelts. Converts Thomas Morrison and David Anderson, defying Protestant kin, crosses branded on their souls. They arrive wide-eyed, trunks heavy with Bibles and dreams, the prairie wind whipping habits like flags of surrender. Unbeknownst, their prey, selected for wealth to fund the facade, strength for labor markets, isolation to vanish without waves. Daily life, a ritual of deception. Dawn at 4:30 a.m., lauds echo in chilled air, breaths visible like ghosts. Mass at 5 o'clock, incense curling like sin's tendrils. Days blend prayer, study, toil, tending gardens where thorns draw blood like atonement. Curriculum: Latin's rigid grammar, Greek's poetic lilt, philosophy's thorny debates, theology's divine architecture, history's bloody saints, morals twisted into knots, canon law's iron rules, homiletics persuasive fire, biblical exegesis peeling layers like onions to tears. Discipline: ironclad, obedience the 11th commandment. No leaving grounds without writ, letters rationed monthly, silence on seminary sins. Males scrutinized like heresies, isolation a spiritual shield, but truly a cage. February 1848, the first shadow falls. Blizzard rages, snow entombing the seminary in white silence, drifts swallowing windows like forgotten sins. Winds scream redemption's delay. Michael Brennan, 22, Chicago Irish pride, grocery empire funds his path. Brilliant in theology, tapped for admin secrets. His letter home: joy in duties, gratitude for sacrifice, no whisper of woe. Evening summons to Walsh's office. Remote wing, stone wall swallowing sound. Portfolio in hand, he vanishes into lamplight. Raised voices pierce the night. Arguments, silences. Shouts from multiple throats. Then abrupt quiet, heavy as guilt. Roommate Joseph Kennedy waits. Rosary beads clicking like accusations. Dawn prayers, Michael absent. Walsh's pulpit proclamation. Urgent cholera call to Iowa border. Priest dead, faithful dying. Michael volunteers, hero in the making. Cholera's grim reaper. Victims convulsing, fluids draining life in hours. Priests as martyrs, plausible, inspiring. But cracks appear. Michael's coat hangs untouched, boots pristine, gloves idle. Suicide in -15 degrees Fahrenheit. No farewell to Joseph. Their nightly confessions unbroken. Rosary heirloom abandoned. Famine survivor's talisman inseparable. Joseph's query, swift wrath. Walsh thunders pride. Skepticism as sins, damnation's door. Penance, basement chapel exile, week of fasting, prayer in damp gloom. Carved into hillside, stairs descending like Jacob's ladder inverted. Walls weep moisture, candles sputter shadows, brazier mocks cold. Isolation breeds revelation, or madness. Midnight hours, hooves clatter on frozen earth, wagons creak above. Voices, Walshi, Marfi, O'Brien Wushid conspiracies, dragging, grunting, springs groaning underweight. What burdens shift in the night? Bodies? Souls? Joseph huddles, breath fogging, heart pounding like judgment's gavel. These sounds etch into his spirit, symbols of betrayal. Horses as apocalyptic steeds, wagons as chariots to perdition. Divine justice stirs, perhaps in the wind's moan or the earth's tremble. For in this house of God turned Babel, sin accumulates like snow, waiting for the thaw of truth. As weeks bleed into months, patterns emerge like stigmata. More vanishings, always in storms, nights thick with fog or fury. Explanations vary, missions to native tribes, retreats for visions, but inconsistencies mount. A left-behind journal, scribbled with doubts. A bloodied handkerchief in the garden. Whispers among students. Eyes avert, prayers falter. The three priests tighten grip. Sermons on obedience as salvation. Doubt as devil's snare. Yet empathy blooms for the lost. Michael's laugh echoes in empty halls, his absence a wound. Dread coils, who's next? Curiosity gnaws. What lurks in administrative shadows? Reflection deepens. Is faith blind or discerning? Biblical echoes resound. Wolves among sheep. Matthew 7 verse 15. False prophets devouring flocks. Guilt's symbolism. Seminary as Eden corrupted. Priests as serpents offering forbidden fruit. Power, not knowledge. Redemption's hint. Joseph's vigil. A prophet in the pit. Like Jonah in the whale, awaiting the storm's end. Expand the web. The impostor's origins. Not Cork's clergy, but Dublin's docks. Fugitives from famine riots. Murders in alleyways. Real Walsh, Murphy, O'Brien. Throats slit on Atlantic crossing. Identities stolen like sacraments profaned. Credentials forged in firelit forges. Letters inked with blood. They arrive, masks perfect, but eyes betray. Cold as Judas' kiss. Trafficking network. Wagons to Mississippi barges. Souls sold south to plantations, north to factories. Profits fund facades. New wings, golden chalices, blood money sanctified. Spiritual chill, divine retribution looms. Seminary grounds whisper, ghostly apparitions in mirrors, bells tolling unbidden. Students dream prophecies, floods of justice, like Noah's deluge washing sin. Psychological depths. Isolation breeds paranoia, faith fractures. Joseph's emergence. Changed, eyes haunted, voice tremulous. He confides and whispers, seeds of rebellion. Historical anchors. 1840s America. Manifest destiny's shadow. Slavery's stain bleeding north. Anti-Catholic know-nothings plot in taverns, torches ready. Churches' desperation. Seminaries as shields, but vulnerabilities exploited. Real events echo. Philadelphia riot scars. Famine's diaspora statistics. 1.5 million emigrated, half starting en route. Sensory immersion. Feel the prairie's isolation. Winds bite, candle wax dripping like tears. Hear creaks in wood muffled sobs. Smell incense masking rot. Taste fasting's bitterness, wine's sacramental deceit. As 1848 wanes, 9 more vanish, patterns undeniable. Thomas Riley, 19, strong as oxen, transferred mid-blizzard. His screams? Wind, they say. But boot prints in snow lead to wagon ruts. Empathy swells. Families' letters returned unopened, hearts shattered. Dread peaks, night watches, bolted doors. Curiosity drives forbidden searches, locked offices, hidden ledgers hinting sales. Reflection, sin's cycle. Guilt begets fear, fear begets silence. Biblical symbolism. Seminary as Pharaoh's Egypt, students as enslaved Israelites, awaiting Moses. Divine justice, not swift, but inexorable, like locusts descending. The impostor's hubris grows. Lavish feasts in private quarters, wine flowing red as blood. Laughter echoes, mocking vespers. But cracks, O'Brien's nightmares, mumbling confessions in sleep. Murphy's trembling hands at mass. Walsh's gray eyes, now bloodshot, scanning shadows. Spiritual haunting, legacy of the true priests. Ghosts in corridors, crucifixes inverting. Prairie winds carry wails, like banshees foretelling doom. Joseph's resolve hardens. Secret diary, buried under floorboards. Entries, dates, sounds, suspicions. A relic for future inquisitors. Emotional arc, from devotion to doubt. Empathy for brethren, fueling courage. Dread of damnation wars with justice's call. Curiosity, peeks through keyholes. Silhouettes loading bundles into wagons. Reflection, redemption through truth, or perdition in defiance. By 1849, the tally rises. Seminary's reputation shines. Enrollments swell, unaware lambs. But undercurrents, whispers reach Bishop Quarter. Dismissed as youthful fancy. Historical context, cholera pandemic's real, 1,849 outbreak kills thousands, cover perfect. Sensory, fever's sweat, death's stench imagined in empty beds. Climax of this chapter, Joseph's confrontation. Not direct, but subtle. Note slipped under Walsh's door. I hear the wagons. God sees all. Response, heightened surveillance. But fear flickers in impostor's eyes. Spiritual undertone, divine eye unblinking, like Proverbs' watchful Lord. This is but the genesis, the fall from grace. The horrors deepen, souls cry for vengeance. Feel the chill, justice, not in courts, but in eternity's ledger. What legacies haunt these prairies? Shadows lengthen, truths await. Deep beneath the seminary's hallowed halls, where the earth itself seemed to weep in condemnation, Joseph Kennedy endured his penance in the basement chapel, a crypt-like void carved from Illinois' unforgiving clay. The air hung heavy, saturated with the musty chill of seeping groundwater, droplets tracing rivulets down rough-hewn stone like tears of the forsaken. Candles sputtered in iron holders, their flames casting elongated shadows that twisted into grotesque parodies of crucifixes, as if mocking the very faith they illuminated. Joseph's breath clouded in the dim light, each exhale a visible prayer for deliverance from the nightmares that now plagued his vigil. For in these unholy hours, between the strikes of midnight and the false dawn, the world above stirred with secrets that clawed at his soul. Lantern glow seeped through the chapel's solitary window, grime encrusted and barred like a confessional grate, painting the walls in erratic patterns of gold and black. Silhouettes moved with purposeful menace. 3 figures, their forms elongated by the low angle, heaving a burdensome parcel, wrapped in coarse burlap, sagging under its own weight, into the maw of a waiting wagon. not with the careless shove of merchants handling crates, but with a reverent caution, as if cradling a relic or concealing a corpse. Hooves stamped impatiently on frost-cracked earth, harnesses jingling like Judas silver coins. Voices murmured in hushed Irish brogues, too low to discern, but laced with the urgency of conspiracy. An hour they labored, the ritual precise as a black mass, before the wagon lumbered away, not toward Chicago's flickering lights, but southward to Springfield's shadowed trails, vanishing into the prairie night like a specter fleeing judgment. Morning broke with deceptive normalcy. The bell towers toll, summoning survivors to lauds, the chapel's incense curling upward in futile pleas for purity. No trace lingered of the nocturnal transgression, no boot prints. In the snow, no echoes of grunts or creaks. Yet Joseph's spirit bore the scars, a gnawing dread that this was no mere smuggling of goods, but a trafficking in the divine currency of souls. Biblical echoes haunted him. Ezekiel's valley of dry bones, stirred not to life but to eternal bondage. Was this divine retribution for the church's hubris, building bridges over America's Protestant chasms only to plunge the faithful into abyssal sin? Guilt coiled in his chest, a serpent of doubt. Had his questions invited this isolation, or was it Providence, positioning him as witness to unravel the unholy weave? 6 weeks after Michael's vanishing, the pattern etched itself deeper into the seminary's cursed tapestry. Thomas Gallagher, 20, a beacon of gentleness amid the rigors of formation, embodied the immigrant's ascension through toil and tears. Son of Klaus Gallagher, once Muller, reforged in America's melting pot, from Milwaukee's beer-soaked breweries, where he rose from sweat-drenched laborer to foreman, his calloused hands now symbols of sacrifice. Anna, his mother, bent over needle and washboard in 16-hour vigils, her fingers raw as stigmata, funneling every cent into Thomas's calling. They sold their modest farm, trading open fields for tenement squalor, walls thin as parchment, echoing with neighbors' despair, to fund this path to priesthood. Thomas carried their burden like a cross, his letters home brimming with resolve. I shall honor your faith with mine, serving God as steward of your dreams. In the refectory, he aided peers with Latin conjugations, his voice soft as vesper hymns, never sharpened by ire. Devotion defined him. Extra hours kneeling before the tabernacle, whispers to the Virgin for strength against the flesh's whispers. March 30th, 1848. Evening prayers dissolved into silence, the chapel's candles guttering like failing hopes. Dean O'Brien approached, his face a mask of solemnity etched in shadow, murmuring of an urgent summons to Walsh's sanctum for academic council. Thomas furrowed his brow, confiding to Heinrich Weber, "My studies thrive. What shadow falls now?" Confusion flickered in his eyes, blue as the Rhine his forebears fled. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, swallowed by the administrative wing's stone maw. From nearby dormitories, muffled voices rose around 9 p.m. Calm discourse fracturing into discord, shouts piercing the mandated quiet like thorns in Christ's crown. Thomas's timbre, usually melodic, strained with distress, rising in crescendos of agitation. Furniture scraped, perhaps toppled in struggle. A thud resonated through walls, heavy as a body falling. Silence descended, thick and accusatory, broken only at 11 p.m. by wagon wheels, muffled with rags, creeping southward under cover of cloud-veiled stars. Dawn Mass. Walsh ascended the pulpit, his silver beard catching the altar light like false sanctity. Thomas, he intoned, had unraveled in confession, a crisis of impure yearnings, incompatible with celibate vows. In shame's grip, he'd fled pre-dawn to a Wisconsin wilderness monastery, embracing silence as salve for his soul's wounds. The narrative struck deep. Temptation's specter loomed over all seminarians, young men wrestling angels in the night. Monastic exile? A Catholic archetype, echoing desert Father's retreats. Yet fissures cracked the facade. Thomas's rosary, carved by Anna on her deathbed, would worn smooth by fervent fingers, lay precisely on his desk, not forgotten but placed a deliberate farewell. $50, family funds locked in Walsh's safe, abandoned, a blow to the Gallagher's fragile ledger, where every coin was blood-earned. Worst, an unfinished letter to Sister Maria, ink trailing mid-sentence. I wake each morning grateful to God for guiding me to this holy place where I grow closer to Him each day, and I cannot imagine any life more blessed than the one He has. Abrupt halt, cool set aside mid-joy. Heinrich, privy to its drafting, recoiled Thomas. Had bubbled with plans to extol Walsh's moral theology lecture. No hint of torment, only zeal. Whispers slithered through the halls like original sin. The original 12 dwindled to 10. Losses too swift for coincidence. Defenders clung to faith. God's summons could strike like lightning, demanding renunciation of earthly ties. But skeptics tallied patterns. Victims from prosperous kin, academically luminous, summoned to Walsh's lair before eclipse. Belongings left as talismans of betrayal, no prior doubts voiced. Atmosphere curdled. Conversations clipped, eyes darting like hunted prey. Camaraderie fractured into vigilance. Each meal a census of the living. Spring thawed the prairies, wildflowers blooming in ironic beauty, but dread flowered unchecked. By Christmas 1848, 5 more souls evaporated, explanations elaborate as Baroque altars. Antoine Du Bois, French fur heir from Detroit, versed in frontier tongues and trails, vanished on emergency ministry to besiege settlements, his skills auctioned to wilderness barons. Heinrich Weber, probing too deeply into Thomas's fate, transferred to Baltimore's German enclave, secrecy forbidding farewells, his family's pleas echoing unanswered. 7 remained, a remnant like Gideon's band, forging unspoken pacts, track summons, inventory treasures, rosaries, letters, heirlooms as harbingers. Joseph, scarred by basement revelations, faltered in studies, haunted by nocturnal symphonies, hooves as apocalyptic writers, bundles as bound offerings. He mapped correlations, disappearances under overcast shrouds, midweek void sans visitors, post-prolonged consultations. Spiritual symbolism gnawed, seminary as Babel's tower, ambition crumbling under divine gaze. Sin's weight, guilt for silence, justice deferred like Job's trials. The impostors evolved, prosperity blooming like forbidden fruit. Walsh's vestments shimmered silk, pocket watch glinting Swiss gold, trinkets of trafficking spoils. Murphy's library swelled with rarities. Gold-rimmed spectacles and spurious crest, ring mocking nobility. O'Brien pranced on thoroughbred stallion, Chicago jaunts yielding finery, his gait aristocratic, not ascetic. Absences mounted, diocesan errands to metropolises, leaving Francis McManus, elderly enigma, furtive as a grave robber, in charge. McManus skulked, speech sparse, eyes darting like cornered souls. Queries on origins elicited flight. Mentions of missing evoked diversion. He navigated forbidden zones, cellars, outbuildings, with uncanny ease, countryside lore-belying cloistered claims. Correspondence? A web of deceit. Families' inquiries met Walsh's script, handwriting uniform as forged gospels. Spiritual silence quashed demands for sons' words. Milestones dangled like unreachable salvation. Millfield's hamlet buzzed. Nocturnal wagons on backroads, deliberate stealth. Farmer Samuel Morrison unearthed relics along fences. Michael's inscribed prayer book, Heinrich's spectacles, Thomas's crucifix, discarded for detachment, Walsh claimed. But symbols screamed, artifacts of Exodus, not enlightenment. Winter 1849 to 1850. Blizzards entombed the seminary. Isolation a perfect shroud for escalation. James Riley, Detroit merchant scion, uncle of bishop's aide, wielded privilege as weapon. Wealth invited scrutiny. Connections spanned hierarchies to Rome. Educated in logic's forge, he chronicled anomalies, timelines exposing weather veils, contradictory alibis, presomniscience on finances, lands, kin, crises, hinted dossiers of predation, ledgers betrayed, revenues bloated beyond tuition, shadows of slave auctions funding facades. James's probe pierced the veil, empathy for brethren fueling dread of his own summons. Curiosity birthed resolve. Notes hidden in mattress seams like Dead Sea Scrolls awaiting revelation. Reflection deepened. Redemption through exposure, or complicity in silence's sin. Biblical undertones chilled. False shepherds, Jeremiah 23, fleecing flocks for gain. Divine justice stirred. Prairie winds as Holy Spirit's breath, whispering vengeance. As snow blanketed sins, operations quickened. More bundles in night, wagons groaning under spiritual cargo. Survivors huddled in dorms, breaths synchronized in fear. Joseph's basement echoes resounded. Not mere crime, but desecration. Souls bartered, eternity pawned. Guilt's legacy. Impostors' eyes, once commanding, now evasive, haunted by reflections and chalices. O'Brien's stallion shied at shadows. Murphy's hands trembled over tomes. Walsh's beard hid quivering lips. Hauntings manifested. Apparitions in mirrors. Candles snuffing sands wind. Bells pealing phantom hours. Students dreamed floods of judgment, like Pharaoh's drowned host, washing the prairie clean. Historical moorings. 1840s frontier. Slavery's tendrils north. Nativist flames fanned by famine influx. Churches, seminaries as bulwarks, but vulnerabilities preyed upon. Real cholera veils, riot scars, Philadelphia's ashes, Charlestown's ruins, contextualized paranoia. Sensory immersion, frostbite on skin, ink scent on unfinished letters, Wagon Woods Creek. Taste ash of unspoken accusations. Feel rosary beads indentations like brands. James's discoveries crescendoed. A pilfered ledger page, entries in code, names, sums, destinations. South to plantations, west to mines, souls commodified. Emotional torrent, dread of betrayal, curiosity's fire, reflection on faith's fragility. Empathy for vanished. Thomas's gentle smile, Michael's fervent letters, ghosts demanding justice. By spring 1850, Tally climbed seminary a shell. Survivors whispered psalms of protection, eyes on doors. Spiritual chill, divine retribution loomed, not in thunderbolts, but in inexorable exposure. What chains bound the impostors? Greed's manacles, sin's eternal forge. Shadows lengthened, truths clawed toward light. In the shadowed recesses of Sacred Heart Seminary, where the prairie winds howled like lamentations of the damned, James Riley pieced together the infernal puzzle. His calculations, etched in secret notebooks by lamplight's feeble glow, revealed a river of unexplained gold flowing through the institution's veins, thousands annually, untethered to tuition or tithes. The air in his dormitory grew thick with the scent of ink and fear, his quill scratching accusations against the silence. What unholy commerce birthed this wealth? James's spirit wrestled with shadows. Biblical parables of merchants in the temple, profaning sacred spaces with greed's golden calf. Guilt gnawed at him. Had his privilege blinded him to earlier signs? Dread coiled tighter. Curiosity burned like forbidden knowledge from Eden's tree. Reflection deepened. If faith was the shield, why did it fracture under scrutiny? December 1849, a breakthrough shattered the facade. Beneath the library's groaning floorboards, oak planks worn smooth by pacing scholars, James pried loose a hidden compartment, its mechanism a cunning interplay of levers, crafted by hands versed in deception's carpentry. Dust motes danced in the slanted light from high windows, revealing a trove of letters, yellowed and postmarked from Chicago's bustle, Milwaukee's ports, Iowa's frontiers. The parchment crinkled under his fingers, inked in varied scripts, a cipher blending mercantile jargon with scriptural veils, blessed consignments, divine allocations. Weeks blurred in decryption, Latin roots twisted with Greek allusions, his classical training unraveling the code like Ariadne's thread through a labyrinth of sin. Sensory assault. The library's musty tomes, candle wax dripping like sacrificial blood, his pulse thundering in isolation. Horror unveiled. Merchandise of prime quality, young, robust, literate. Delivery timetables to industrial moss. Physical descriptors, height, strength, piety, commodities appraised like livestock at market. November 15th, 1849, a missive chilled his marrow. Latest shipment, 2 prime specimens. German youth, educated, fetched premium for coal overseer duties amid immigrant hordes. Irish lad to Wisconsin lumber, his quill skills prized for ledgers. Transactions seamless. James's breath caught. Empathy surged for the vanished. Thomas's gentle prayers. Heinrich's probing questions. Now reduced to entries in a devil's ledger. Trafficking scale loomed. Educated Catholics, isolated lambs, sold as overseers, trustworthy in faith, expendable in absence. Networks spiderweb states. Buyers in mines where darkness swallowed souls. Lumber camps echoing axes like judgments fall. Transportation veiled in night wagons. Covers woven from cholera tales and missionary myths. Pricing's cold calculus. $300 to $500 for theologians. Premiums to $800 for polyglots or craftsmen. Damaged goods disposed. Euphemism for murder. Bodies consigned to oblivion. Spiritual symbolism pierced. Seminary as Judas' field of blood, purchased with betrayal's silver. Divine retribution whispered. Would justice reign like Sodom's fire? James's dread peaked. Intercepted letters, his Latin-coded plea to Uncle Patrick returned with Walsh's scrawl, ecclesiastical review mandated. Trapped in a web of surveillance, he gathered shards of proof, heart pounding with the weight of complicity's sin. Redemption's flicker. Expose or perish, like prophets stoned for truth. January 1850. The summons came post-Vespers. Walsh's office, a transformed lair. Persian rugs muffled steps, their threads rich as stolen tithes. Oil portraits, saints with accusing eyes, hung in gilded frames, shadows leaping from Walsh's desk lamp. Ledgers sprawled, ink fresh as wounds. Flanking him, O'Brien and Murphy, stances predatory, cassocks hiding daggers perhaps. Walsh shed his scholarly mask, voice gravelly with Dublin's underbelly grit. Questions breed accidents in these wilds, lad. Threat bare as a blade, yet hesitation flickered. James's lineage a shield, disappearance inviting diocesan hounds. Offer extended. Join the syndicate, scout affluent kin for harvest, share spoils. Or silence for survival, monitored like a penitent under lash. Revelation. Operation Strange showed, disappearances mounting, whispers reaching hierarchies. Allies needed to deflect probes. James recoiled. Complicity damned souls eternally, like Cain's mark. Agreement? Fleeting reprieve, then elimination. He stalled. Time to prey on it. Tension thickened, air electric with unspoken verdicts. Weeks of peril, surveillance shadowed every step. McManus lurked, journal peeking from robes, notes scribbled like indictments. Belongings rifled, books askew, papers fingered, nocturnal intrusions leaving tobacco's acrid ghost and boot prints in dust. James slept fitfully, dreams of graves yawning like Gehenna's mouth. Empathy for predecessors swelled. Michael's rosary, Thomas's letter, relics of interrupted lives. Dread's grip, who's watching now? Curiosity drove deeper probes. Reflection on faith's trial. Job's endurance, or David's sling against Goliath. Breakthrough amid lockdown. Bi-weekly devotions. Confinement to quarters. Silence enforced like monastic vows. James suspected ruse. From his window, lanterns bobbed like will-o'-the-wisps across grounds, wagons rumbling in secrecy. February 15th, 1850. Risk incarnate. Slipping shadows, he descended to basements. Expanses beyond the chapel's damp penance. Tunnels hewn fresh, earth sent raw as open tombs. Workshops, storerooms, tools for restraint, crates for cargo. Deeper, a vault of damnation, ledgers bound in leather like forbidden grimoires, correspondence stacks, maps veined with routes like arteries of evil. Scope appalled, Sacred Heart a nexus in a decade-old empire. 200-plus victims, $100,000 plus reaped. Entries cataloged. Physicals, educations, prices. Missing classmates listed, plus scores from sister institutions. Destinations. Mines choking on coal dust, farms reaping blood, factories grinding bones. Permanent disposal. 17 at Sacred Heart. Murdered for suspicion, escapes attempted. Bodies interred across acres, unmarked as the unforgiven. Spiritual chill. Ground as potter's field, souls unresting, haunting winds as their pleas. Divine justice? Or hell's overflow? Footsteps echoed. Walsh, lantern swinging, face etched in suspicion. James doused his light, crouched behind crates, breath shallow as prayer. Walsh probed. Locks rattled, papers shuffled, curses hissed. Proximity. 3 feet, tobacco reek, beards silver glint. Minutes stretched, eternal, sweat beading like holy water. Satisfied, Walsh retreated. James memorized. Names, sums, routes. Ammo for apocalypse. Opportunity divine. March 1850, Bishop Giovanni Montini. Vatican envoy, canon law's scourge. Tours Midwest incognito. Pius IX blade against corruption. Exposés in Europe. Fraudulent friars, sinful seminaries. Secrecy is armor. Inspections unannounced, piercing veils. James overheard Walsh Murphy panic. Vatican wolf in Chicago, sniffing trails. Plan hatched. Volunteer for preparations, roaming freely, amassing proof. Letter to Montini via quarters residence. Latin veiled. Urgent counsel on authorities' moral bounds. Canon violations witnessed. Innocuous to spies, alarm to scholars. Historical tether. 1850s church amid immigration waves, scandals brewing. Real visitations combating nativist pressures, financial woes. Sensory weave. Parchment's crisp turn, ink's bitter tang, basement chill seeping bones. Taste fear's metallic edge, feel ledger's weight like sin's ledger. As missive dispatched, tension crested, McManus's eyes bored holes, pre-sermons thundered obedience like thunderbolts. James's spirit fortified, redemption through revelation, like Moses parting seas of deceit. Empathy for the 17, graves whispered names, urging justice. Dread of failure, eternal silence. Curiosity, what chains bound McManus? Trembling accomplice? Reflection, faith's crucible, forged or fractured. Montini's shadow lengthened, prairie thawing under spring's tentative sun. Seminary's facade cracked. Whispers among remnants, dreams of exodus. Impostor's hubris waned. O'Brien's stallions sold hastily, Murphy's tomes hidden. Walsh's eyes, once piercing, darted like the guilty. Spiritual haunting. Apparitions in corridors, veiled figures, crucifixes weeping blood in visions. Bells tolled, unbidden, echoes of the vanished. James's letter winged forth, a dove amid ravens. Response pending, he cataloged more. Disposal sites mapped, hollows under oaks, symbols of Judas tree. Victims' profiles, families shattered like Job's kin. Psychological depths, survivor's guilt, sin's stain on the soul. Biblical resonance, false prophets devoured, Ezekiel 34. But shepherd's crook turns rod of iron. Climax neared. Would Montini descend like avenging angel? Or snares tighten? Divine retribution stirred. Winds carrying omens, earth trembling faintly. Legacy chilled. Sacred Heart, beacon turned sepulcher, haunting America's Catholic dawn. In the shadowed grip of 1850s Illinois, where telegraph wires hummed like nerves of an awakening nation, James Riley's desperate missive cut through the veil of deceit. Crafted in Latin's ancient cadence, it masqueraded as a plea for theological counsel, on the bounds of authority and moral imperatives amid canon breaches. To the untrained eye, a seminarian's query; to a Vatican sage, a clarion of corruption. Sensory weight pressed upon him, the parchment's crisp fold, ink's acrid bite, his allowance coins clinking in a farmer's palm. Samuel Morrison, the weathered neighbor whose fields bordered the seminary's cursed acres, bore his own suspicions. Belongings strewn like forsaken relics along fence lines, nocturnal wagons groaning under unseen loads. For a bribe, he rode to Springfield's distant post, 40 miles through mud-churned trails, evading the impostor's watchful net. Empathy surged for James. Isolated, surveilled, his every breath a potential betrayal. Dread shadowed his steps. Curiosity fueled the risk. Reflection haunted. Was this hubris, challenging false idols, or providence, like Daniel in the lion's den? Response swift as divine intervention. No formal decree through monitored channels, but a covert summons to St. Patrick's humble chapel in Millfield, a wooden sanctuary, beams creaking under winter's thaw, incense mingling with pine sap from surrounding woods. March 15, 1850, Bishop Alessandro Veracino, inspired by real Vatican envoys of Pius IX era, who conducted unannounced audits amid growing American diocesan concerns, arrived unheralded, a compact figure in his 50s, eyes dark as judgment's abyss, robes whispering authority earned from exposing European monastic frauds. Latin flowed between them, privacy's shield, as James unveiled the abyss. Transcribed letters from library caches, timelines etched like stations of the cross, disappearances sinking with blizzards and isolation. Financial ledgers bloated with phantom riches, far beyond tuition's meager stream. Verifiable truths, names of the lost, transferred to fictive missions, suspected graves under prairie swells, the trio's opulent anomalies, silk vestments, imported tomes, thoroughbreds unfit for ascetics. Veracino's horror-mounted, quill-scratching notes in a leather-bound tome, queries sharp as inquisitorial probes. His Irish studies expose credential flaws, Maynooth's honors mismatched, Louvain's degrees untraceable. Vatican archives beckoned. Encrypted telegraphs zipped to Rome. Pius IX pontificate, 1846 to 1878, leveraging new wires for swift scrutiny. Within hours, revelations. No ordained Walsh. Murphy, O'Brien dispatched from claimed seas. Real clerics, sailing on the ill-fated Brig Hope in 1846. Vanished amid reported piracy off Newfoundland's treacherous coasts. Echoing rare, but documented Atlantic raids in the waning pirate era, like the 1828 Morning Star assault, where buccaneers plundered identities and lives. Church presumed them martyred. Replacements filled voids. Historical echo. Amid famine's exodus. Over 1 million Irish dead, 1.5 million fleeing on coffin ships to America's ports. These impostors hijacked holy mantles, preying on vulnerability. Coordinated reckoning unfolded with hierarchical precision. Diocesan allies, federal marshals, empowered post, 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, though here twisted to pursue slavers northward. Local sheriffs vetted for incorruptibility. March 20th, 1850, pre-dawn encirclement, 12 men, breaths fogging in crisp air, rifles glinting under starlight, sealing escapes like heavenly siege. Seminary loomed, bell tower silent as a tomb. Assault swift, doors breached, halls echoing boots on stone. Walsh, towering, bearded, clung to facade, chains clanking like Judas' betrayal, decrying Protestant persecution, demanding ecclesiastical trial. But Veracino's dossier shattered illusions. Edmund Walsh unmasked as Seamus McKenna, Dublin slum spawn, famine-era gangster who robbed immigrants. Escalating to shipboard slaughter for credentials. Torture extracted backstories. Murders silenced truths. Murphy, Liam Doherty, forger extraordinaire, versed in theology's veneer to launder souls in silver. O'Brien, Fergus Lynch, brute enforcer, hand-stained with a dozen kills, including seminarians who glimpsed the snare. Spiritual symbolism crushed. These wolves in sheep's garb. Matthew 7 verse 15, profaning the sanctuary like money changers in the temple. Divine justice? Winds howled as if heaven roared approval. Empathy for the unmasked. Not monsters born, but men twisted by greed's serpent, famine's despair birthing desperation. Full exhumation unveiled abyss. Across 400 acres, searchers probed earth, shovels biting frozen soil, lanterns casting ghastly glows. 7 remains unearthed, skulls caved by blunt savagery, bodies in shallow pits concealed by sod and thorns. Preservation varied. Older bones bleached, recent flesh clinging like accusations. Methodical disposal bespoke expertise, graves aligned with windswept hollows, evading plows. Network sprawled, ledgers linked to shadow operations in Indiana's farms, Wisconsin's lumber mills, Iowa's mines, Minnesota's frontiers, echoing real 1850s forced labor in free states, where indenture blurred into bondage amid industrial boom. Over 200 victims in a decade, profits soaring past $100,000, astronomical, rivaling small towns' worth. Buyers, coal barons seeking literate overseers for immigrant crews, lumber lords craving record keepers amid vast forests. Historical grounding, post-famine influx, hundreds of thousands Irish landing in nativist America, riots like Philadelphia's 1844 infernos, 13 dead, churches razed, fostering isolation ripe for exploitation. Trial in Springfield, national spectacle, newspapers inking headlines from Boston to St. Louis. One of America's earliest organized trafficking prosecutions. Evidence avalanche. Ledgers detailing sales, correspondences with Midwest magnates, survivor testimonies, James S. voice steady, eyes haunted. Morrison's account. Fence-line artifacts, prayer books, crucifixes, scattered like breadcrumbs of damnation. Nocturnal disturbances, earth turned in moonlit fields. Convictions sealed. Murder, abduction, fraud, conspiracy. August 15, 1851. Gallows erected, crowd of 5,000 swelling. Victims kin weeping, clerics praying, nativists jeering validation of anti-Catholic fears, real know-nothings, rising in 1850s, exploiting scandals. Hangings. Necks snapped, bodies swaying like pendulums of justice. Winds carrying final gasps across prairies. Aftermath's lingering chill. 6 of 10 trafficked recovered. Emaciated from mine shafts, suffocating dark, lumber camps brutal cold, scars from whips and chains. Rehabilitation, church-funded care, physicians mending broken bodies, confessors soothing shattered psyches. Some mended, others wandered eternal, eyes vacant as the lost. 4 vanished eternally. Heinrich Weber, Antoine Du Bois, Patrick Kelly, Sean Malloy, swallowed by expansion's maw, families' grief unending, like biblical wanderers in wilderness. James Riley, offered ecclesiastical assent, seminaries in Rome or New York, hierarchy's gratitude paving paths. Declined, trauma, forged new calling, federal marshal, hunting traffickers with honed insight. Career spanned 30 years, rescuing 300 plus, convicting 200, techniques pioneering, echoing modern pursuits. Spiritual arc, from aspirant priest to earthly avenger, redemption through action, like Samaritan binding wounds. Church's penance, trust eroded amid nativist flames. Real scandals like 19th century clerical misconduct, e.g., Manager Capel's U.S. controversies, amplifying distrust. Reforms, rigorous verifications, multiple attestations, Vatican cross-checks via telegraph. Oversight, unannounced visitations, reports mandatory, echoing Pius IX 1850s pushes for diocesan accountability. Sacred Heart shuttered, buildings boarded, Gothic spires dismantled, land auctioned to wary farmers. grounds cursed in lore, nocturnal wails, phantom wagons rumbling non-existent roads, bells tolling from vanished towers. Apparitions, shadowy figures and habits, pleading eyes. Psychological? Or souls unresting, demanding vigil? Region shunned it, misfortune befalling tillers, crops withering, livestock ailing, as if earth rejected peace. This saga, rooted in 1840s chaos, famine's exodus, 1.5 million to U.S., cholera ravaging ports, anti-Catholic riots, Charlestown convent torched 1834, Philadelphia's 1844 bloodshed, westward manifest destiny masking exploitations, warns of vulnerability. Isolation bred evil, blind faith its fertilizer. Biblical undertones chill, false shepherds fleecing flocks, Ezekiel 34, but whistleblowers as David's felling Goliaths. Divine retribution, not fiery bolts, but human hands enacting justice, legacies haunting like Cain's mark. Psychological depths, greed's corrosion, trauma's eternal echo. Haunting query, in trusted halls, does sin lurk eternal, or can vigilance redeem? Emotional immersion, field chains cold bite, graves damp soil, survivors trembling relief. Dread the impostor's gaze, empathize with family's void. Curiosity probes what shadows linger in history's margins. Reflection, faith tested, not broken, redemption in exposure, like light piercing darkness.